Okay, so this is a video for a commercial loan scenario, specifically for the acquisition and development vertical construction for an apartment complex. So let's walk through our typical scenario. So we first obviously want to know a little bit about the asset itself. So you want to ask some questions like, what is the square footage of the site? So let's just assume that it's a 4 or 5 acre piece of dirt in Phoenix, Arizona. Let's say that it's entitled, because we want to know what the entitlement status of it is. Is it already zoned and approved for multifamily? Let's just assume there's 40 units that can go on there. We also want to know if all of the water is to the site, all of the utilities are to the site. We want to know if there's power, et cetera, et cetera. Some other things that you would want to give some attention to as well is, are there any improvements to the site? Is there some curb and gutter and things of that magnitude, a pad-ready site or non-pad-ready site? So is it just raw dirt that still needs a lot of improvements, or is it something that's already improved? So in this particular scenario, we're just going to assume that it's not improved, it is entitled, it is a piece of dirt, more of infill in terms of the location versus on the outskirts in a Prescott or in a smaller city. But you want to know if it's a major metropolitan area. Then you want to start going into some information about, how many units? We'll assume it's 40 units. What's going to be the unit mix of that? How many 2-1s? How many 1-1s? If there's studios, 3 2s on that particular apartment complex. We also want to know if it's going to be individually metered or not. Is it going to be stacked high, or is it just going to be ground level as well? What amenities are they going to provide for this location? So we're just assuming that there's 40 units. It's a good mix. There's probably a pool that's going to be there. Maybe there's a clubhouse. Not exactly sure. But you want to get some of that asset information and the square footage of the units. You're just trying to get an understanding of what the footprint is going to look like. So once you get that, you say, okay, check, we're good there. Then we want to go again to urgency. Are they under contract right now? Or are they just sort of fiddling around? Do they have experience? Is there some motivation? Do they already own the site or not? Do they have money that's invested in there? And so that just helps us understand that this person is motivated or not. And once you identify that there's a high level of commitment, then we keep moving forward as opposed to hitting the pause button. We go to the next step, a loyalty factor. Who else are you working with? What other lenders are you talking with? What other lenders have you worked with in the past? Again, remember, we're just trying to understand if we really have a viable shot, if they're shopping this like crazy, where are they at in the cycle so that you can make best use of the priorities that you have. Once we move on from there, obviously we're always going to go to the same thing: viability, cash flow, credit, credibility, collateral. So cash flow, we want to know, have they done projections? Have they put a budget together? Do they have a pretty good idea of what the net operating income is going to be for this particular project? So that's really important, understanding that. Then you also want to find out what their own cash flow is outside of it. Is this their whole thing? Do they have a job working somewhere? Do they have other investments that they make income on? You really need to understand what their financial position is. What's their cash position? Where is that down payment going to come from? So all those things are important as you're trying to identify if this is viable or not. What's their credit like? Remember, bankruptcy, foreclosure, short sale, lawsuits, anything that has issues, we want to know that up front. We understand, that we need to know what their credibility is. Have they done this before? Is this their first time? Are they raising equity right now? You really need to gather all that information in order to assess whether this is viable or not. And remember something too, is that we need to know what their expectations are. Are they expecting 80% loan to cost? Are they expecting non-recourse financing? Do they want to do something that is, includes a permanent loan in there? What interest rate are they expecting? Costs, et cetera, et cetera. So once you've gathered all that information, then we ask ourselves the question, how do we structure this deal? What kind of feedback do we give? Well, for an apartment project where someone's buying the land, then what you're first going to do is understand if they're just going to buy the land, hold on to it for a long time. It's very different. And if they're buying the land and they're moving straight to building. Because if somebody buys the land and they're not quite ready, they don't have plans, they don't have approvals, they don't have drawings, budget, etc., then they're really going to have to do a land takedown. And that's probably going to be 50% loan to value with a bank. Maybe you get to 60, depends on the strength of that particular person, but otherwise it's going to be a private loan if it's just purely a speculative piece of land, which is going to, again, cost you probably 10 to 12% in financing if there's any other issues with it. If they're going to go straight to buying and building and they have some of that ready, then you can do a takedown of the land. You're going to be at 75% loan to cost or 70% loan to cost, somewhere in that ballpark, depending on the viability of the project, depending on the credibility of the person. And it's going to be a construction, so it'll be a land takedown. So if they have to put in X amount, might be the land takedown is their equity injection. So they buy the land cash, put that into the project as their equity, and then the bank will fund, or the institution will fund, the remaining balance of that over draws over time. You are definitely going to have to do, if you're dealing with a bank, you're going to have to do construction recourse during construction with probably a release provision once it's on the perm. There's a small chance you might be able to get partial recourse or some level of burn off during that if they're really, really credible, have a lot of experience. But otherwise, you're just going to expect that you're going to have recourse on that. The other thing to remember as well, if you go with more of what our institutional capital, if it's larger and it's a non-recourse loan, it's probably, again, 65 to 70% loan to cost. You're going to pay 7 to 8, 9% in the capital cost. It's going to be more expensive on fees going in. They'll probably be a little bit more lenient on the budget that they have there in terms of them having things padded in. So those are a few things to remember expense-wise for a bank construction loan. You're going to be in the fours, high threes, fours during construction. And then your perm takeout is going to be probably a Fannie or Freddie, 90% for 90 days, long-term 30-year amortization, fixed for 5, 7, or 10 years, non-recourse. You're going to be in the, threes, low to mid threes right now for that kind of money. So that gives you just a commercial scenario for a vertical construction land takedown for an apartment project for the loan associate.